The sky was full of fire and noise. Alien ships floated above the mountains, glowing with strange lights. Their weapons were powerful, shooting beams that could melt stone. But below, the dragons stood strong. Their scales shone like black metal in the sun. Every weapon the aliens fired hit the dragons' bodies and bounced off as if it were nothing. The humans watching from the ground could hardly believe it. The dragons were enormous. One of them, black as night with eyes like molten gold, spread its wings over the valley. Its tail swung like a hammer, crushing the rocks under it. Another, smaller but fast, darted through the air, its claws slicing the alien ships that tried to follow. Even the smallest dragon looked dangerous, but the largest were unstoppable. The humans' weapons, laser rifles, energy cannons, and guided missiles, shattered the moment they touched the dragon's scales. The aliens hovered above, shouting and laughing through their translators. "These mortals are weak," one said. "Their weapons cannot harm even a hatchling. How can they hope to fight us?" The humans did not answer. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with fear. They had trained for years to face alien invaders, but nothing had prepared them for creatures this strong. In a small village far from the front lines, a blacksmith named Merrick worked quietly. His workshop was full of tools and scraps of metal, and the smell of fire and iron hung heavy in the air. He was a tall man with strong arms, his hands covered in soot and small scars from years of hammering steel. On the wall hung a hammer, old and rusty, its wooden handle worn smooth from use. Most people would have thrown it away long ago. Merrick looked at the hammer and ran his hand over the metal. "Maybe it's time," he whispered to himself. He had watched the battle from a distance. Every weapon the humans built had failed. The dragons could not be hurt by alien technology. They were untouchable. But Merrick had an idea. A strange feeling told him that even a simple old hammer could make a difference. The ground shook as one of the dragons landed near the human camp. Its claws left deep marks in the soil, and its roar echoed across the valley. Soldiers ducked behind walls and barricades trying to hide. They fired their weapons again, but the blast did nothing. Sparks bounced off the dragon's scales, and it shook its head as if laughing. The aliens above screamed in frustration as their ships were damaged by the dragon's tails and claws. In the village, Merrick packed a small bag with tools and the rusty hammer. He did not take a sword or gun. Those would not work. He walked to the edge of the valley, where the mountains rose like walls of stone. From here he could see the dragons moving across the battlefield, their wings cutting through the clouds. He felt fear, but it was mixed with excitement. This was his chance to do something no one else could. As he walked toward the battlefield, he remembered the stories his grandfather told him. "Sometimes the smallest tool can do what the greatest weapon cannot," his grandfather had said. Merrick did not understand it then, but now he felt it in his bones. The dragons were strong, yes, but he was human. Humans were clever, brave, and full of ideas that no alien could imagine. The first dragon he saw closely was massive. Its scales were black, almost like the surface of a mountain. Its eyes followed him, burning with intelligence. Merrick stopped for a moment, looking up. The dragon lowered its head, its breath warm on his face. He felt its power, ancient and endless. Most humans would have turned and run, but Merrick did not move. He held the hammer tightly and thought about what he had to do. Above, the aliens were becoming more desperate. Their weapons had failed, and their ships were being damaged by dragons that no human could control. They tried new weapons, faster missiles, energy blasts, but the dragons were always one step ahead. The humans watching saw hope in the dragon's strength, but they also knew their side was weak. They needed something extraordinary to change the tide of the battle. Merrick took a deep breath and stepped forward. Each step made the ground tremble under the weight of the dragon's wings and the sound of alien engines. He felt small, but he also felt a strange kind of power. It was not the power of guns or ships. It was the power of courage and the belief that one human could make a difference. The dragons roared again, shaking the mountains, but Merrick did not flinch. He gripped the hammer with both hands, feeling its weight, feeling the fire from his forge running through him. Somewhere inside, he knew the aliens would never expect this. No alien weapon could pierce the dragon's scales, but maybe a human could. Maybe a human with courage, skill, and a rusty hammer could do what machines and lasers could not. The battlefield was ready. The dragons were untouchable. The aliens were desperate. And Merrick, a simple blacksmith, began the journey that would change everything. Merrick moved carefully through the valley, the hammer swinging lightly in his hand. The dragon's wings beat the air above him, creating gusts strong enough to knock a man off his feet. Sparks flew from alien weapons, hitting the ground, exploding in clouds of smoke. Soldiers ran in panic, shouting orders, but even their loudest voices could not match the roar of the dragons. Merrick kept walking. He knew the aliens thought humans were weak, but he had spent years learning a different kind of strength. Machines, lasers, and plasma guns might be powerful, but they had no mind. They had no heart. The dragons were strong, yes, but he had something they could not predict. A human mind, clever and patient. He found a small rise in the rocks and stopped. From there, he could see the largest dragon, Obsidian, moving slowly among the alien ships. Its scales shone in the sunlight, smooth and unbroken, perfect armor. The alien weapons were firing continuously, beams and bolts bouncing harmlessly off the dragon. Merrick studied the scene carefully. Every weapon had a pattern, every machine a rhythm. But Obsidian's movements were natural, unpredictable. He realized something important. Brute force would not work. He needed a plan, a smart plan. Merrick crouched behind a boulder, watching the dragon. He remembered the old stories his grandfather told him about dragons and humans. Sometimes, humans could do things dragons did not expect. Sometimes, a human could turn the impossible into possible with clever thinking. He looked at the hammer in his hand, old and rusty but solid. The metal felt heavy but steady, like it knew it had a job to do. He thought about how to strike. He could not hit the wings or tail, they were too strong and the dragons would easily deflect any attack. He needed a point where the dragon was powerful, but also where his strike could connect with its natural energy. Merrick had seen the way dragons moved their chest when they breathed, how they flexed their muscles to fight. That was it. That was the spot. He began to climb a rocky ridge closer to Obsidian. Every step was dangerous. Alien blasts whizzed past him, cutting deep furrows in the rocks. He ducked, rolled, and kept moving. His clothes were singed in some places, his hands burned from small fires that exploded nearby, but he did not stop. Merrick knew if he failed, humanity would lose this battle. He also knew if he succeeded, everything could change. Finally, he reached a point where he could see Obsidian's chest clearly. The dragon's golden eyes glanced toward him. Merrick froze for a moment, feeling the heat of the dragon's breath on his face. It was not angry, it was curious. He realized something. The dragon could sense him, but it did not know what he would do. That gave him a chance. One small, smart action could make the difference. Merrick raised the hammer, holding it with both hands. He remembered how his grandfather had told him to feel the tool in his hands, to let it become part of him. The hammer was not just metal, it was an extension of his strength, his skill, his courage. It had been used in battles long ago and now it had a new purpose. He took a deep breath and ran toward the dragon, dodging debris and alien fire. Every step made his legs ache, but he kept moving. He reached the edge of a cliff near Obsidian and leaped, swinging the hammer with all his might. Sparks flew as the metal connected with the dragon's chest. There was no sound of breaking, no explosion, but something shifted. Merrick felt a vibration through his arms, through the hammer, through the ground beneath him. The dragon twitched slightly, its eyes widening. The aliens screamed from above. Their weapons had failed for years, and now a single human dared to strike the invincible dragon. They fired again, but Merrick had already moved. He watched carefully, noticing how Obsidian reacted. The chest had a small crack in the scales, a crack too small to see from far away, but it was there. It was proof that his plan worked. Merrick smiled even as the aliens continued to attack. He realized something important. Strength alone could not defeat the dragons. Aliens used power and weapons, but humans had ingenuity. Humans could think, adapt, and find solutions in ways machines and aliens could not. One human with the right idea and the courage to act could change everything. He ran back a few steps, taking position for another strike. The dragons were distracted by the alien ships, and the humans around the valley began to notice Merrick. They saw a man, small compared to the dragon, moving boldly. It gave them hope. Perhaps there was a way to fight after all. The wind from Obsidian's wings pushed him forward, carrying energy from the dragon itself. Merrick felt it in his hands, in the hammer. It was as if the dragon's strength was responding to him, not in friendship, but in acknowledgement of his courage. That small moment gave him confidence. He was no longer just a human against monsters. He was a human using his mind, his skill, and an old tool to do what the aliens could not imagine. Merrick crouched, readying himself for the next strike. He watched carefully, studied the dragon's movements, and planned his next action. This was the human gambit, the moment when courage, intelligence, and simple tools combined to challenge the impossible. And Merrick knew that if he succeeded, the battle would not only be remembered for the dragons, but for the humans who dared to strike when no weapon had worked before. The valley was alive with chaos, fire, and fear, but Merrick felt calm. He was ready. He was human. and humans could do what aliens could not. Merrick tightened his grip on the rusty hammer. The wind from Obsidian's wings whipped his hair across his face, but he did not flinch. The dragon's chest rose and fell with powerful breaths, each one shaking the ground beneath him. Sparks and smoke rose from alien weapons that still fired blindly, hitting the dragon but bouncing off without effect. Merrick had waited for this moment and now it had come. He crouched low behind a boulder, watching Obsidian carefully. The dragon's golden eyes were sharp and focused, scanning the battlefield, noticing every movement. Most humans would have frozen in fear, but Merrick's mind was calm. He had studied the dragons, studied their movements, and now he knew exactly where to strike. Not the wings, not the tail, not the head. He aimed for the chest, where the dragon's power seemed to pulse in rhythm with its heartbeat. He took a deep breath and ran. Each step was measured but fast. Rocks and debris flew past him as alien fire struck the ground near him, exploding in bright flashes. Merrick ducked and rolled, keeping his eyes on Obsidian. The dragon's massive claws scratched the earth as it shifted its weight, but it did not attack him. It was aware of him, curious perhaps, or maybe simply too focused on the alien ships above. As he reached the edge of a cliff, Merrick leapt. Time seemed to slow. He swung the hammer in a wide arc, aiming straight at the dragon's chest. The metal struck with a heavy clang. Sparks flew, scattering like fireflies. The hammer did not bounce, nor did it shatter. Instead, a small, sharp crack appeared in the black scales, barely visible but undeniable. Merrick felt a vibration shoot up through his arms and into his shoulders, a strange resonance he had never felt before. Obsidian froze for a moment, head lifted, eyes wide. The dragon's roar shook the valley, louder and deeper than before. It was a roar of surprise, perhaps respect, or maybe even recognition. The aliens above froze too. Their weapons, which had failed for years, had finally met something they could not ignore. A human had struck the impossible. Merrick landed on the ground, rolling to absorb the impact. His heart pounded and his arms ached from the swing, but he felt alive. He had done what no weapon, no machine, no alien strategy could do. The dragons were not invincible, and he had found the way to reach them. The valley was quiet for a moment, except for the rumble of Obsidian's roar and the crackle of alien fire. Merrick studied the dragon. The small crack in its chest seemed to shimmer slightly as if alive. He realized then that the hammer was not just metal. It was a tool, yes, but it had connected with the dragon in a way the aliens' machines never could. It was more than force. It was resonance, timing, and courage combined. Merrick backed up slightly, keeping his eyes on the dragon. He had to stay careful. One wrong move could end everything. But he also understood something new. The dragon had noticed him and it was aware of his purpose. He was no longer just a human in a valley of chaos. He was a player in a battle where brains, courage, and skill mattered more than lasers and fire. The aliens above began shouting orders, trying to reorganize their attacks. Target the human. He is the cause of the breach. One screeched through a translator. But their commands were too late. Merrick had already moved, preparing for another strike. He ran along the rocks, dodging debris, and studied Obsidian's movements carefully. The dragon's chest rose and fell in a pattern he could predict. Timing was everything. He swung the hammer again, carefully, not with brute force but with precision. Sparks flew again. The crack widened just slightly, and Merrick felt the energy of the dragon flow into the hammer. It was strange, almost magical, but real. The resonance between the hammer and the dragon made the metal hum faintly in his hands. He had never felt power like this before. Obsidian let out another roar, louder than the first, and moved back slightly. Merrick realized the dragon was not angry, it was testing him, acknowledging him, measuring his courage and skill. Other dragons above seemed to sense it too, circling closer, watching Merrick with interest. They had seen humans fight with weapons before, but never like this. A single man using an old hammer had struck where aliens could not. Soldiers on the ground stared in amazement. They had seen their weapons fail repeatedly, but now they saw a human succeed. Whispers ran through the ranks. Perhaps humans were not helpless after all. Perhaps courage, intelligence, and cleverness could win against the impossible. Merrick crouched again, breathing heavily. His muscles burned, but he felt stronger than ever. The hammer was heavy, but it was steady in his hands. He realized then that this was only the beginning. One strike had proved the possibility, but it would take more skill, more courage, and more cleverness to finish the battle. He looked up at the sky, at the alien ships, and at the dragons circling overhead. Everything depended on the next few moments. The world had changed with that first strike. A human had pierced the impossible, and now everyone, dragons and aliens alike, would have to respond. Merrick smiled slightly. He was small compared to Obsidian, but he was brave, clever, and ready. One human with one old rusty hammer had begun to challenge the fate of the battlefield. And nothing would ever be the same again. The valley was alive with chaos. Fires burned across the human encampments, alien ships hummed with deadly energy, and dragons moved like living mountains of black and gold. Merrick stood on a rocky rise, the rusty hammer in his hands, watching what he had started. The crack in Obsidian's chest glimmered faintly, and Merrick felt a strange sense of connection to the dragon. It was not a friendship, not yet, but a recognition. He had done what no alien weapon could. He had pierced the impossible. Obsidian roared, louder than the sound of alien engines, and moved forward. The other dragons seemed to sense it too. They circled closer, wings spreading wide, claws ready. They had fought humans before, but they had never seen one brave enough to strike them, never seen one clever enough to bypass their natural defenses. Merrick realized then that the dragons were not just enemies, they were beings of intelligence and power, capable of respect and judgment. The aliens above panicked. Their weapons, once unstoppable, now seemed meaningless. They fired wildly, hoping to scare Merrick away or drive the dragons off, but the dragons moved with purpose. Obsidian's eyes followed Merrick as he ran, and the other dragons began to coordinate, swooping down at alien ships with precision that no machine could match. The humans on the ground watched in awe. They had fought alongside dragons in small skirmishes before, but now it felt different. Merrick's courage had changed everything. Merrick knew this was the moment to act. He shouted to the nearby soldiers, pointing at the dragons. Work with them. Don't fight them. Strike with them. At first, the humans hesitated. Years of training had taught them that dragons were unpredictable and dangerous. But seeing Merrick, small and determined, face Obsidian without fear, gave them hope. They followed his lead, setting aside their weapons for precision and timing instead of brute force. Obsidian turned toward a squadron of alien ships. With a powerful beat of his wings, he lifted off the ground and crashed into them. Sparks flew as claws tore through hulls, engines exploded, and the aliens scrambled in panic. Merrick ran alongside the dragon, swinging the hammer not to injure but to signal, timing his movements to match the dragon's attacks. It was strange, almost like a dance, human and dragon moving in rhythm to strike the enemy. The other dragons joined in, diving and twisting through the sky, their roars guiding the humans. Merrick led a small group of soldiers, showing them how to work with the dragons rather than against them. It was not easy. Bullets had to be fired at just the right angle, charges dropped at the right moment. But with Merrick's guidance, humans and dragons began to fight as one force. Each dragon had a human partner now, and every strike was deadly. The aliens, confident in their invincible technology, could not understand what was happening. Merrick's heart pounded, but he kept focus. He saw Obsidian's eyes glance at him, almost approvingly. The dragon seemed to understand his intent, and that understanding made every strike more effective. Sparks flew from alien ships, fireballs exploded in midair, and humans and dragons moved as if connected by some invisible thread. For the first time in history, humans and dragons were not fighting for survival or dominance, they were fighting together. The tide of battle began to turn. Alien ships fell one by one, engines smoking, crews screaming. The humans' confidence grew. They no longer hid behind walls or weapons. They ran forward, guided by Merrick's strategy, striking with purpose and trusting the dragon's instincts. Even the smallest dragons played a role, flitting between enemy fire, creating openings for humans to strike. Merrick paused for a moment, catching his breath. The hammer in his hands vibrated faintly, as if it had absorbed the energy of the dragons themselves. He realized that it was more than a tool now. It was a symbol of the alliance forming in the valley, a human hammer guiding dragons, humans learning to fight with dragons, and dragons acknowledging human courage. It was proof that strength alone was not enough, that ingenuity and bravery could create something impossible. Obsidian landed again, shaking the ground with his weight. Merrick ran forward, raising the hammer in triumph. The other dragons landed nearby, their wings folding over the humans, creating a protective formation. For the first time, Merrick felt not fear, not desperation, but power. Together, humans and dragons could challenge the aliens, could win battles thought impossible. Above, alien commanders screamed orders, but they were too late. Their machines could not adapt quickly enough to the new strategy. Human minds, clever and adaptable, had found a way to use dragons as allies rather than enemies. The aliens had underestimated the human spirit, and now they were paying the price. Merrick lowered the hammer slightly and looked around. Soldiers cheered, dragons roared, and the valley echoed with the sound of battle changing. The impossible had become possible. The humans had discovered a way to stand beside the dragons, to fight with them, and to win. Merrick knew the moment would be remembered for generations. The rusty hammer was no longer just a simple tool. It was a key, a symbol of alliance, courage, and human ingenuity. Merrick's strike had not only pierced the dragon's scale, it had pierced the barriers between species, between fear and trust, between humans and creatures that once seemed untouchable. The battle was not yet over, but Merrick and his new allies had shown the universe something important. When humans dared to think, to act, and to trust, even the strongest enemies could be challenged. The dragons, once untouchable, had become partners. The aliens, once certain of victory, were beginning to realize that humans could not be ignored. And so, in the smoke and fire of the valley, a new alliance was forged. One hammer, one human, and a group of dragons had changed the course of the battle. Merrick looked at Obsidian, then at the sky filled with alien ships, and smiled. The war was far from over, but for the first time humans and dragons stood together, ready to face whatever came next. The battlefield was quiet now, though smoke and fire still lingered in the air. Alien ships had retreated, engines sputtering and shields cracked. The dragons landed one by one, wings folding over their massive bodies, resting but alert. Merrick stood in the middle of the valley, the rusty hammer in his hands. It was battered, worn but still solid. Sparks from its first strike seemed to linger faintly along the metal, glowing like a heartbeat. He looked around at the humans nearby. Soldiers were cheering, helping each other up, and staring in awe at the dragons. Merrick realized something. They had fought alongside the dragons, not against them. They had learned to trust something bigger than themselves, something stronger, and that trust had changed the battle. Humans had survived not because of their weapons, not because of technology, but because of courage, cleverness, and the will to act when it mattered most. Obsidian approached Merrick slowly, each step shaking the ground. The dragon's golden eyes met his, and for the first time, Merrick felt the weight of true recognition. This was not just a creature. They were ancient, wise, and powerful beyond comprehension. And yet they had acknowledged him. One human, standing alone with a rusty hammer, had altered the course of the battle. Merrick knelt slightly, placing the hammer on the ground. He could feel a hum, a faint vibration through the metal as if it were alive. The dragon sniffed at it, nudging it gently with its massive snout. Merrick understood then that the hammer had become more than a tool. It was a symbol, a bridge between humans and dragons. It carried the story of courage, of ingenuity, and of daring to strike where no one else had tried. The other dragons gathered around, wings overlapping, creating a circle that seemed almost protective. Merrick noticed something remarkable. They were not attacking, not threatening. They were acknowledging. They had seen the humans fight alongside Merrick, moving in rhythm with the dragons, trusting them, learning from them. The dragons had accepted this alliance, and Merrick realized it was the beginning of something far greater than a single battle. Above, the last alien ships hovered uncertainly. They had expected humans to be weak, to fall under fear and fire. Instead, they had met creatures stronger than their weapons, and a human smarter than any machine could predict. The aliens retreated, unsure of what to do next, while Merrick and his allies, human and dragon, remained in the valley, victorious not through power, but through strategy, courage, and understanding. Merrick picked up the hammer again. He had felt its weight change, lighter now, as if it carried the energy of the dragons within it. Sparks danced along the metal, and he realized something important. This hammer, this simple rusty piece of metal, had become a key to the future. It was a reminder that humans could succeed where machines failed, where brute force could not. Ingenuity, courage, and determination mattered more than technology. The soldiers gathered around Merrick, looking at him with respect and admiration. "How did you do it?" one asked, his voice full of wonder. Merrick smiled, wiping sweat and soot from his brow. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "The dragons helped. We worked together. We just needed to try where others had given up." The humans nodded, understanding at last that true strength was not just power, but the willingness to think, to act, and to stand when it mattered most. Obsidian lowered his massive head, nudging Merrick gently. The gesture was subtle, but the meaning was clear. Trust had been formed. An alliance had been created. The dragons had accepted humanity not out of fear or weakness, but out of recognition of courage and intelligence. Merrick felt pride, not in himself alone, but in all humans who had dared to act, who had dared to believe. As the sun set behind the mountains, the valley glowed with the orange light of victory. Flames still burned, but they were no longer a symbol of fear. They were proof of change, of new possibilities. Merrick stood tall, hammer in hand, looking at the dragons above. He realized that this was only the beginning. The battle had been won, yes, but the war for respect, understanding, and alliance was just starting. The rusty hammer had done more than pierce the dragon's scales. It had pierced the walls between species, between fear and trust, between humans and beings of unimaginable power. It had shown that even the smallest, simplest tool, guided by courage and cleverness, could achieve what no alien weapon ever could. Merrick smiled to himself. The humans had learned something that day. They were not weak. They were not helpless. They were clever, adaptable, and brave. They could stand alongside dragons, they could challenge aliens, and they could shape the course of the universe itself. The dragons lifted into the sky again, wings stretching across the horizon, a reminder of power and respect. Merrick held the hammer high, feeling its weight, its energy, and its promise. A new era had begun, an era of humans and dragons, of courage and ingenuity, of hope and possibility. And in that quiet moment, Merrick understood the truth. It was not the hammer, nor the dragons, nor even the battle that mattered most. It was the human spirit, the will to act, to think, and to dare when all odds seemed impossible. That spirit, he knew, would live forever. The valley was calm now, but the story had only just begun. Humans had proven themselves, dragons had accepted them, and the universe had learned to respect what it had once overlooked. Merrick looked at the horizon and smiled. One hammer, one human, and a little courage had changed everything.